very heavily impacted me. I definitely had to fight tears back a couple times during that. You know, I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk with you without getting into that emotion, and I'll probably go release it afterwards because it's important to get that out. But hearing somebody in my age range come up and put themselves in front of people to talk about a subject that is hard, and someone who's been there and lived a life that a lot of these kids want, who are athletes, right, who want that, and to sit there and be vulnerable, and that vulnerability is so important. Like, I was just so impacted by it, and I really appreciate you coming to speak with the kids here today, man. And I feel very blessed to have been able to be a part of that audience, seriously. And I think maybe one of the first questions I want to ask you is, what do you think a happy, healthy adult is?
Well, that's a good question, brother.
Yeah, it's a tough one, I know.
I think a happy, healthy adult is someone who understands that happiness is a fleeting feeling, and they have the tools to navigate life with an appreciation for all aspects of it, the highs, the lows, in between, because I feel like suffering is a part of life.
Absolutely.
And the more you try to avoid it, the more you suffer. So someone who has a relationship with all of the emotions that life will inevitably evoke and is able to process those emotions and manage how those emotions manifest in their behavior, like, that's someone who has a recipe for success. You know,
Absolutely.
It's this inability or resistance to ever feeling certain things that limit the quality of our life, because then we walk around as a shell of ourselves, constantly trying to avoid certain feelings. And it's like, genuinely, like, when I say everything you want in life is on the other side of vulnerability, that's what I'm referring to.
So I took some time before your speaking today to kind of read up on you a little bit and read some articles, and I found one from 2014 when you were still at Cushing Academy. You were still in high school, and the article was a lot about your work ethic. It started with you. I'm sure you remember this one, but you were going to the gym in the morning. You'd seen some people running and stuff, and it was just talking about how you were taking 500 shots before
every morning.
Yeah.
Every single morning.
And so how does that work ethic for you translate now into your later life? And do you feel like that is something that has made you who you are in terms of your mental health, or is that something that you've had to, like, look out from?
I think that, like, at that point in my life, like, my work ethic was something that every coach in the country knew when they recruited me. They knew that I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning. They knew that I wasn't going to avoid the work. And the problem was, nobody understood what the attachment to the work was, myself included. And I worked so hard out of this desperation, out of this fear of living the way that I was and chasing this life that I wanted, that there was an unhealthy attachment to it. And it's so easy for that to, slip through the cracks, because we live in such a capitalistic society where, the hustle culture is, marketed and spilled onto every athlete, every kid, every person in this society. And this is something that only the individual can do, is, like, ask yourself, like, there's a difference between running towards a life that you want and running from a life that you don't like. Yeah.
I get you,
There was an addictive brain that was masked behind that. Right? It was a very regimented and structured person. The anxiety was spilling all over my workout routine, because if I didn't get this many shots up before the game or before school, then I must be getting further and further away from my goal. That was my way of escaping back then, and now that's something that I have to be mindful of in this work, right? Like, I have to be mindful of not saying yes all the time, of not taking every speaking engagement that comes up, or going to work with every team that wants me to, because if I don't take time in between to, like, sit with myself, then I'll just run, because that's how our brains are programmed to avoid. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And so when I hear you say that you don't take every speaking engagement, I do have to ask this because I will be writing an article, but why did you choose Severn? Why did you choose Severn as a speaking engagement? Was there anything about the school that stuck out to you? Is it a school that you've had a relationship with before?
I don't have a prior relationship with Severn School, but I'm very familiar with the environment. I went to prep school. I know what it's like to live in such a bubble,
Yeah.
such a tight community where there's always eyes on you. To have people in such close proximity to you, but also feel so far from everyone and so isolated, that's a feeling that these sort of environments almost cultivate. So I wanted to, speak directly to these kids because I know that, like, obviously you can tell in the engagement, like I know that they feel that.
And do you feel like kids sometimes who exist in this bubble find it harder to talk about their emotions? Do you feel like it's because there is a lack of understanding, whether it's from parents, authority figures, whatever it is, that getting into these emotions is seen as weakness? And at a school like this that is a prep academy, right, that weakness is not what they want shown, right? They don't want their kids to be seen as weak. They want their kids to be seen as strong, great athletes, going to a great college, Ivy League, whatever it is. Like, how like difficult is it for you to be able to look at this school and speak? I probably didn't frame that question exactly the way I wanted to.
I think the people who are blessed with the opportunity to go to a school like Severn, it's like a double-edged sword, right? It's a gift and a curse because a lot of times, like, the parents see their kids as an extension of them, and they've been projecting that energy onto the kids their entire lives. And then the kids get here and, they don't want to mess up the opportunity. So with all these eyes on them and coaches and teachers constantly, like, hovering over, being honest and breaking that mold or that mask that has helped you feel safe in this environment can feel really daunting. And it's not until somebody gives you permission to do so and actively reminds you of that you feel comfortable to do that. And that's what I want these conversations to do. It's like, okay, there's no leaving this room denying that we're all struggling with this on some level.
Truly, yeah.
So when we see someone put on that mask, it's like, you don't got to do that with me, bro. Like, we're good.
Yeah. I mean, the mask thing, man, again, that stuck with me too, like, because it is so easy to put on a mask, and especially, like, in my other job, in my capacity as a bar manager, I'm around individuals, I'm around the public all the time.
Yeah.
There is a face I have to wear to an extent, and that's difficult, and I know that these kids come here and they wear a face. They come here and they have their struggles, and as a kid, it can be so hard to look past that and think, well, if I talked about this to somebody, so I'm going to be held accountable. And that was one thing, that would have been my answer, is accountability, being held accountable. That's something that keeps me afraid of showing my full face. It's like, are people going to think less of me and hold me accountable to these actions? I think just the last thing is it's this lasting message that you want to leave people with. What is that long-term message that you want for kids to have and for anybody that you present to?
It's one, if you don't know how your brain works, it's going to work against you. Right? That's one. You need to understand the way that our brains are programmed to work. Because if you don't know that, then you'll never tap into your full potential. It's a level of awareness that you need to hijack and expedite the process of growth. Number two is everything you want in life is on the other side of vulnerability. Simple. Everything you want in life is on the other side of vulnerability. And my third one is speaking to the first in the fact that all of our brains are programmed to avoid suffering and discomfort and scanning the world for evidence to support it. So when you go into these spaces and you have an understanding of how your brain is going to scan and digest the room and all of the emotions that it evokes, you have to be aware that just because your brain is telling you something does not mean that it's true. So, and that's the only way you can, like, it's the awareness that allows you to create separation between what you think and who you actually are. Just because you think something doesn't mean it's true. Just because you feel something doesn't mean that it's true,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's, again, like, having difficult conversations as a manager is something I've had to learn, and it's still something I have difficulties with when I have butting heads with one of my stronger-willed servers or bartender, whoever it is, a guest, whoever it is. Like, that's not easy to step out of your comfort zone and have that difficult conversation with them, whatever it is about. Whether it's mental health, whether it's something that's going on. Vulnerability to me is not just being vulnerable with yourself and your mental health issues, being vulnerable with situations that you're in with people, with being honest about how that feels, and you spoke to that. Being honest about how you feel about something, being honest about how somebody makes you feel about what they've done. And like you, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
you kind of answered during your thing was like when somebody, how do you know to let somebody into your inner circle? How do you know when like those feelings that you're feeling are going to be too much for somebody, or if they're going, like you said, they're going to weaponize them against you, right? If they're going to be manipulative, if they're going to take that and tell other people about you in that sense and try to bring you down and throw dirt on your name. And you spoke to it and you said it doesn't matter. It's not about you at that point. What they say about you is not about you. It's about them and their insecurities, right? Mm-hmm. And that means so much, man. That meant so much to hear. Like, I don't need to ask you that because you answered that right mm-hmm. there, honestly. Like,
yeah, I think it's like when I feel like when it comes to like conversations surrounding mental health, our culture thinks that they hear that word mental health and they assume coddling. When in reality, having conversations about mental health, real conversations about mental health, I think of accountability, yeah. Right? Because every single person that was in this room that filled a seat is accountable for their ability to identify, process, and manage their own emotions. And when you start really doing the inner work on yourself to be able to develop those skills, you start to realize that nothing in life is personal. Because every situation, every interaction is going to evoke some sort of emotion, and how you identify, process, and manage in that situation has all to do with you and nothing to do with me. 100%. What I tell you, whatever emotion that evokes in you, has all to do with how you identify, process, and manage that situation, because the information's unbiased. Whatever I'm telling you is unbiased. It's your relationship with how that information makes you feel that impacts your reaction.